we meet more people who are doing the same thing we're doing. And I think for other people, I've seen so many wonderful examples of other companies, employees unionizing and connecting throughout the country. And I think that's just super important and such a great example of how workers can sort of pool their power together.
Hi all, I'm Katie Barrows from the Department for Professional Employees, AFL-CIO, and I'm here interviewing Raz Golden, who is a director and a member of the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society, or SDC. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your involvement in your union?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Raz Golden, pronouns are he, him. I'm a freelance theater director in New York City and around most of the East Coast. And so I first became involved with the Stage Directors and Choreographers Society, SDC, about 2 years ago when I joined the production of Macbeth on Broadway. And I entered in first as an assistant director. But when it became necessary for an associate director to be on, and I was transitioned to the duties of associate director, I joined SDC in order to make sure that I would be paid and treated in accordance with associate director on a Broadway show.
What led you to join your union? Like, why did you become an SDC member?
I joined my union because I needed as much support and backup to make sure that I was paid a fair wage for my work as an assistant director and then later as an associate director. And so, you know, I had the support of my director who I was working with and my agent, but I also really used the support of the union, who were aware of all of the salaries that people were making on that commensurate to me and could counsel me on ways to make sure that I was getting paid what I worth, both in a monetary value and a benefits value.
That's great. And then how did you become involved in the effort to bring associate directors and choreographers under the SDC contract and ultimately become SDC members?
Yeah, well, because of my work on the Scottish play and the longer sort of negotiation with Broadway League producers and making sure that I was covered as associate director, and the fact that this year associate directors and their rights and their fair wage are a cornerstone of the negotiations between SDC and the Broadway League. I was reached out to by Randy and Christy from SDC to be a part of the negotiations. They wanted to make sure that there was a good representation of current associate directors on Broadway on the negotiation team.
That's awesome. And then how has your workplace already changed since becoming an SDC member?
The beginning negotiation is so much easier. It's there is a sense that I have a union protecting me, and even though right now we don't have union minimums, that's one of the things that we're looking to change. There's a certain level of legitimacy, I guess, that it's afforded to me by union membership. There's an understanding that I am a professional theater director and that I'll be doing this for a long time, and that I should be paid and should be given things like title page billing because it's commensurate with my experience.
Awesome. And then what advice would you give other professionals who are considering joining or forming a union in their workplace?
Oh, yeah, I would say it's really, really useful. I think a lot of people are afraid of dues. And yeah, you know, giving money to people and sometimes not feeling immediate effect can feel not great, but actually what those dues are for is for long-term success for everyone. And not to mention that union membership it really provides like a network, so that if you with theater direction, it can feel like sort of a lonely thing, but the union connects us. And so we meet more people who are doing the same thing we're doing. And I think for other people, I've seen so many wonderful examples of other companies, employees unionizing and connecting throughout the country. And I think that's just super important and such a great example of how workers can sort of pool their power together.
Yeah, and as you may know, a lot of folks don't know a lot about unions before, a lot about unions in general. And so kind of learning more and getting to the process of forming a union can be kind of challenging because of like that lack of knowledge. So can you talk a little bit about what you knew about unions before joining SDC, and like kind of like what what you've learned as a union member, and telling folks how it's not as intimidating as some might think it is.
Yeah, of course. I feel like I learned about unions first off in high school, as like sort of historical objects. Like is the unions helped fix things like responsible working hours and child labor laws. Like unions were really, I felt like in high school, you talk about unions and you're talking about the early 1900s. But when I started getting involved with the entertainment industry, the most prominent unions that I became aware of were SAG-AFTRA, which is the union for movie and television actors, and Actors Equity, which is the union for theater actors and stage managers. And so I learned a lot more about that. At least in the entertainment industry, if there's a worker, they're almost 90% protected by a union, because in a industry where people are often doing something they love and there's something they're passionate about, there is a lot of chances for exploitation, and unfortunately, and so a union really, really helps to protect people from that exploitation while allowing them still to work in a place that they love and that gives them purpose. Yeah, I used to think that unions were just for factory workers, but now I know that they're for professionals like myself, and they're really useful to help anyone who in any sort of industry protect themselves and get paid their fair wage.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. And is there anything else you would like to share before we conclude?
I would say that if that I was a little bit worried about what would be required of me as a member of a union, and I was assuaged in that way by talking to someone who already was a part of it, or and then also talking to a representative from SDC, and those folks, at least in my experience, want the best for you and will lay it out to you straight and help you through all of the nitty gritty, because it's to their benefit that you fully understand what it is you're joining, so that you can become a really good member of your union.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and have a good day.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be able to speak.